So before I turn the floor over to you, Steve, could you just take a moment, tell us a little bit about yourself and your business?
Sure. So I am an author and a speaker, and I have been self-employed for 17 years by choice. I spent two 10-year spans of time with small companies, helping them grow their business. And then I reached a point that I think many of us who are self-employed reached, where I thought, nobody's going to make the perfect job for me. And I'm either going to make it or I'll have to put up with whatever somebody else says is the role. And so I decided, I had 5 kids under my roof, and I rolled the dice and made the bet on myself. And it's been quite a ride for 17 years. And a lot of what I do is train on communication skills. And much of my focus over the years has been sales, marketing, writing, communicating, and especially how can we, our tiny little voices in this world, rise up above all that noise and gain attention. And that is the challenge for any small or micro business.
Wonderful. Well, with that introduction, I want to give a shout out to our mutual connection, Josh Burnoff. Am I remembering
Josh
his last name?
Burnoff. Yeah.
So Josh and I came connected by way of Bobby Carlton. Like all the cool people are connected, I'm convinced. And then you and I came to be connected that way, and the timing was just perfect because I said I have one more space left on my live-a-thon, and after we had our conversation, I said, why don't you come on? And I said, what would you like to talk about today? And you said how to get really focused and get to the point. So what I'm going to do now is turn the floor over to you. I've seen that you've shared your screen, your slides, I should say. I'm going to add that to the stream. And now I'm going to pull myself off of screen here, Steve, and I will turn the floor over to you.
Okay. And I guess the little controls will work just fine. So let's get to the point. Uh, there is a universal challenge that all of us has in life and in business, and that is we're surrounded by an awful lot of stuff. And if we're going to actually make any impact on people, somehow we've got to be heard. And that means we've actually got to have a pretty clear focus of who we are, where we're going, and what we're saying. So the big challenge for me is how do you help people win at communication? And if you're looking at this slide and you're seeing that the wandering path from A to B, that's what many of us experience when people are communicating. It's like, where are you going? And what's the point here? And unfortunately, we can lose opportunities for work and for new roles and for new relationships if we don't exercise the skill of getting to the point. So in a few minutes today, I'm going to give you some very tangible ways that you can become very good at getting to the point and getting your focus tight. One of my favorite quotes, and it's disputed whether George Bernard Shaw really said this or somebody else, but I don't care because it's a great quote. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And we assume that because words have gone out, or a video has gone out, or a blog post, or an email, or whatever, that we've communicated. That's far from true. We can never assume that our message has landed and turned the light on in our audience. So we have to design our communications to be incredibly effective. And the biggest problem in ineffective communication is too much information, TMI. When we try to present too much stuff, we shut down the brain of the person we're trying to reach. It's overwhelming when we open an email and it's 1.5 miles long, or when we look at a book and it's about 70% too large for what you really need. And of course, there are people that just wander and wander and wander and say too much in meetings. And the inevitable result of all that too much information is we lose the audience. Well, that's what we've got to work on getting better with as far as focus and getting to the point. Now, take a look at this email. This is a real email to real customers that a business sent. It is so bad, it is so overwhelming that there is absolutely no way anybody can read it. That thing might have the numbers for the next $1 billion lottery drawing in it, and you'd never find it because you are not going to look at that. This is the kind of thing that we cannot do. If we're going to be effective with people, we've got to learn to use words in a way that work instead of that work against us. What people need is the needle, not another haystack. If we give a haystack, if we back up a dump truck and just dump words, there's no way anybody can know what we're really trying to do. So part of my concern as a speaker and as a consultant and a trainer is how can we actually get to that point and bring it forward so that we engage people instead of disengaging. So the skill that we want to have is moving directly, briefly, and quickly to the relevant point, the thing that matters to the audience. We can't waste time. In journalism, you've probably heard the expression, don't bury the lead, which means don't take the key thought, the real point of this article, and put it way down where no one's going to see it. Bring it forward. And I'll show you a couple of techniques you can use for that. Now, here's the thing. Every one of us has one major competitor, and it's the same competitor for all of us. What we're competing against is not that other company or that other consultant or that other brand. We're competing against noise and distraction. People are looking at screens now 7 to 10 hours a day. That's your competition. We're checking our phones 100 to 350 times a day. We're getting perhaps anywhere from 80 to 200 emails a day. We're being interrupted constantly. And our challenge, our competitor, is with all of this other stimulation, how do we get through? This is a challenge for companies big and small. But what we have to know is that we not only have a common competitor, we have a common customer. It's called the human brain. And the human brain works in a certain way. It has an operating system. The brain wants information the way it wants it. And the way we can win as communicators is by knowing what the human brain wants. Are you ready to find out? It's actually pretty simple. And this is the golden key to communication. Here's what's going on with the human brain anytime, actually not only anytime they're being communicated with, but anytime period. Your brain and mine is processing 11 million bits of information per second from all 5 senses. We're pouring that much into the brain. We should be completely overwhelmed and turned into a puddle on the floor. But that's what's going on. And the brain has to filter out, this is an unconscious process, it has to filter through all of that 11 million bits and focus. And the focus is, if you're looking at this screen right now and you're engaged with me, you are using 60 bits. That 60 bits is what focus is. You can only focus on 60. And you're competing against 11 million. How in the world do we win that challenge? What's the brain looking for as far as focus? You even know just to have two people talking to you at the same time can drive you crazy. I was in a restaurant a few weeks ago, great restaurant. I was with family members. It should have been a really nice time, but it was one of those restaurants where the tables were really close and something about the acoustics. It was so loud in there, couldn't enjoy the conversation. It was either yell or just shut up. That's where the brain gets overwhelmed. It doesn't help that there's too much stimulation. So your brain and mine has this wonderful neurobiological filter. It's called the reticular activating system, or RAS. And its job is to go through all that stimulation and to bring to your attention something to focus on. So here's the question. What does the RAS want? What's it looking for? Well, it's a very simple acronym. And if you've been in sales, you know this acronym. What's in it for me? WIIFM. That's the radio station that the master filter of the brain is tuned to. Immediate personal relevance. What matters to me is what I'm going to pay attention to. So here's the trick for you as a communicator and me. You and I have to front load every communication with something interesting and relevant, or we will be buried in the noise. You have to start with what matters to your audience, because the RAS is looking for relevance. TMI will kill it. Focus and getting to the point will allow you to win. So let's get practical. You've got information. You've got a message. What I would encourage all of us to do, strategically and tactically, is I'm going to take my information and I'm going to stratify it. And I use the image of a pyramid. The first core thing in one sentence is, what's the essence that I'm trying to get across? What's the distilled point? That's what you're going to lead with, is something that can be summed up in one sentence. That's what gets you through the RAS. Once you've done that, once you've engaged attention by getting right to the point, that earns you the right to tell a little bit more, to give a little outline, to give some bullet points, context, a story. That earns you then the right to talk about more details if they're needed. This is what I call a brain-friendly progression. And what I write about in my books is being brain-friendly. That's how to communicate. What does the brain want? Give it to it the way the brain wants it. And instead of a bunch of unstructured information, we should give people stratified information. How do we do this practically? Here's what I would like to see every one of you do starting at the end of this live-a-thon. The next email you write, bring up into the subject line and the first sentence the point. Is it a deadline? Is it an action item? What is it exactly that you have as a goal or a purpose or an intention? Instead of waiting several paragraphs, put it right up top. Why do we do that? Because you have to fight the inbox. The inbox is being filled with dozens of messages. And what do we preview? The subject line and first sentence. So you're going to win the battle of the inbox by front loading with the point. And in fact, I've changed the way I email now. I send almost all of my messages are single theme, short, brief, that can be responded to quickly. Otherwise, people will delay or delete. So you can make this clarity change right away in your next email. Another thing you want to do, especially if you're self-employed, especially if you're trying to project a brand, is you want to create what I call memory darts. You've probably heard the term elevator pitch. Boy, I hate that term. Nobody wants to be talked to in an elevator, and nobody wants to be pitched. I prefer memory dart. A memory dart is something short and sweet that sticks right in the memory, turns the light on. One of the most important ones that I talk about is using symbolic language. So if someone is the Mercedes of bloggers or podcasters, by using an existing image and stealing it, you are implying high quality, exclusive, great. That's why I go by the nickname, the King of Clarity. I can't plant 47 thoughts in your head about who I am, but if I can occupy that one pixel in your mind, hey, this guy's the clarity guy, I win. And you, as a self-employed, even as a micro business, you can do a phenomenal job branding if you reduce your message down to simple, focused memory dart that is easy for people to remember and refer. Here's the challenge we all have. We are just another whatever until our message says we're not. Just another podcaster, just another consultant, just another realtor, just another whatever. Just another syndrome means we blend into the background like all the penguins on the ice floe. But what we want to do is bring forward how we are differentiated and bring forward what's important in our message so that we rise above all that fog and noise. In my recent book called The Point, I discuss these 4 simple rules of communication design. First, what's the point? You got to have a point, something condensed. Then you have to quickly get to the point. Then you want to get the point across. Make sure you arrive at shared meaning and memory. And then the goal is to get on the same page, reach alignment and agreement and action. This very simple framework of 4 steps can structure the way you do anything from a 30-second TV ad to a blog post, to a book, to a podcast, to a presentation. These are the steps that you need. I do have 2 books out. You may want to just grab your phone and take a picture of these QR codes if you wish. My first book, Clarity Wins, is from 2018. And this book talks about defining your niche and making memory darts and having a very focused business approach. And the new book, The Point, which comes out October 17th, is the entire formula for clear communications that you can implement and that entire teams and companies can implement to be more effective communicators. And I do much of my interaction on LinkedIn, so please feel free to look me up on LinkedIn. I have a weekly newsletter there if you follow, or we can connect together, and I try to share as much valuable information about communications as I can on LinkedIn. Brenda, I really appreciate the time, and if we've got time for any questions or comments, let's do that.
Absolutely. And we certainly do have some time for questions or comments. So if you enjoyed this talk from Steve, we'd love to hear from you, and go ahead right now and drop into the comments any questions you have, or if you just want to reflect upon anything that Steve shared with us. I just want to say, Steve, I really enjoyed this. This was such a great presentation, but Steve had sent me his slides a few days ago and I looked through them. I'm like, his whole topic, it was such a clear, crisp presentation, his delivery style. I just want to commend you as a speaker and as a presenter. You were so on topic, and you delivered in the same way in both the slides and in the delivery. So I just really want to say, really nicely done, and we appreciate that.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. I mean, for one, I cannot afford to not be clear because, if I'm the king of clarity, I'd better be clear, and I'd better
Right?
be clear in my books, in my talks, in my blog posts. And it's an ongoing challenge. I mean, you know, nobody's perfect at this, and I'm going through a rebranding process right now because my message has shifted somewhat, and the way I'm positioning myself has shifted. So some of my online stuff, my websites are a little bit stale right now and don't have current message, which they will soon.
Yeah.
Um, and Marla, thanks about the visuals. Um, I believe a lot in networking, and one of the things I did during the pandemic was networking with some people at a coffee shop, local coffee shop, and one of them, the baristas, was an art student or a graduate, and I wanted to get some custom visuals made, some graphics. So I asked Olivia if she would create graphics for me, and so she did, and she did a phenomenal job. And it's been in all my presentations, in my courses, and now in my book. And so I believe in simplicity, and I think simplicity in graphics also helps get right to the point.
Mhm. I love it. And there's a couple other comments that have come into. Here's one from Philip, and Philip is saying he's had the privilege of teaching college students, and your message, Steve, is so important not only for all of us who are self-employed as business owners, but also for the next generation. You know, this text messaging generation that's out there right now, right?
Mm-hmm. You know, what's interesting is that texting and before that, Twitter
Mm,
really taught me the discipline of being real brief. You had to. And it's an important skill. Now you can be way too brief, but Twitter made me get out of the mentality of saying too much and being too logical and being too complete. And in the fast-paced business world, we don't have time to deliver a white paper with every conversation. We've really got to tweet the thing out.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's yeah, Twitter really taught us to be brief because it was I was it is it still 140 or is it 280 now? I
I
think
think
they
it's gone
extended.
up to 280 or maybe it's unlimited now. I don't know.
Uh,
I thought the
no, yeah,
140
threads.
was great though. I mean, it was really a good way to force people to think about communications differently, and it shaped the way I approach things. You know,
Yeah.
that distilled top of the pyramid. That's what Twitter teaches you to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm gonna go back to one of your earlier points. I see a comment coming in from Laura about this. And I love the hierarchy of like what's the essence and the outline and then some of the main points that you're addressing. And Laura says in her email, she always has subject lines that will say what's needed in all caps, action requested or review requested,
Yes.
plus whatever. Do you like that approach, Steve, with
I
giving the
absolutely
conclusions?
do. Now, some people can overdo it. They
Yeah.
can be, I mean, just stupid about it and say, if you don't answer this email today, a nuclear bomb will go off. Okay, fine.
Right.
But yeah, put a deadline right there. Need your one-page input by Friday at noon.
Mhm.
And I like it when somebody tells me what they want. It's one less thing I have to sort through and figure out.
You don't have to think too hard about it. It makes it really easy for you, right?
No, I've got 11 million bits going through there. I don't want more confusion. Come on.
Pretty well. And I think that's a point. I see some other comments coming in here, really reflecting upon your visual aids and things like that. And we can't see the name of this person, but I see their comment, minimal writing. That in what you had delivered today, you weren't doing what I see a lot of solopreneurs doing, which is putting everything in the slide and then reading the slide off. Or I think we get nervous because we want our business to be successful and we don't want to have too little information in there because then they don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, no,
Um,
less is more. Less
yeah,
is more, less is more. And I've learned over the years. So my visuals are very much the fruit of my thought process here that the slides are there to make one point quick, and they're there to accompany me saying what I'm saying. If I'm reading it, what value do I have?
right.
You can read
Mhm,
it all on your own.
right. Yeah, and we get, I mean, we know that Steve has a lot of knowledge to offer. Even he didn't have to cram it all into the presentation today. He was very methodical about the information he shared, and we know that he's knowledgeable. On that note, Steve, there might be people that are watching today going, "This Steve guy, he seems pretty interesting." So, is the best place for us to look you up LinkedIn to try to connect with you there, or what would you like us to do?
Yeah, LinkedIn's the best place. I have a website at stevewoodruff.com that's in the process of being refurbed, and in about a month and a half it'll have all totally new
Okay.
branding and new messaging, so it's a little dated right now. Oh well.
Okay. So
But I do a
that's a
lot
part
of
of
my.
being self-employed too, right? Like your website gets out of date as your business evolves. That's all good.
It's true. It just it's hard to do everything. I mean, I've been doing everything for 17 years, and for crying out loud, it's tiring to keep all those rocks in the air.
And but I think going back to the point of even you who seems like you've got it down pat, you're successful, you've been around the block with your business, we go through iterations of our business where we are being self-employed in the offerings that we have. And sometimes you take a look at what you have on your website and you realize that's not relevant anymore. And this happens to me all the time. I work with clients and they look at their LinkedIn profile and I read it to them and they're like, well, that's outdated and that's not. And I'm like, hey, I'm here to help you, but keep in mind all the other people looking at your profile or looking at your website and they're seeing this outdated information.
Well,
So for
as you
go ahead.
know, what people when they come on LinkedIn, they're going to
Mhm.
look at the headline, they're going to look at the picture. They might look at just a couple things. So just like the email, we've got to make that top visual real estate of LinkedIn really, really tight and focused.
Mhm.
So putting in the keywords, putting in a very brief headline, putting in accompanying video, having a professional picture. I mean,
Oh gosh, yeah.
you know. So one of the most important things that I teach people when we talk about personal branding and about getting to the point with your messaging is
Mhm.
LinkedIn is really when people Google your name, and we all Google people, the first thing that comes up often is their LinkedIn profile. Well,
Mhm.
those first inches of LinkedIn space, that's going to be where people are making decisions.
Yeah.
And we got to get that right.
Yeah, and you got to get to the point quickly. Going back to your topic of, we have to be very crystal clear for people. So, if someone is watching and is interested in working with you, Steve, could you remind us what are the services and offerings that you would have for solopreneurs?
So what I do with solopreneurs is I can do deep dive sessions on branding to help people figure out their message, figure out their strategy, and those can take anywhere from 2 hours to a half day to a full day in some cases. And then what I also do for larger companies is workshops, and so I lead workshops for groups and teams who are looking to sharpen specific areas of communication skills. And But I love working with solos. I have this, I'm a solo,
Passion, yeah.
and I
Mhm.
do. I have a passion for seeing people succeed on their own and not be scattered and not have an undisciplined message, but be really, really tight in their minds as well as in their words with
Mhm.
where they're going, because then you can be referred.
Mhm.
If we're scattered, nobody knows how to refer us accurately.
Sure. Yeah, really good point. All right, well, we'll check your LinkedIn out for now because we know that the new website is coming soon. And I know that you mentioned the books, and this will be available for folks that register to get access to the playbacks. I'll also include the links. Steve has a couple books here. Here's the one on Amazon called Clarity Wins, and you can go to claritywins.org. And then I know you also mentioned the Point book. It's due to be released in October, and they can go to that website, impact, let me just spell it out, impactiviti.com/THE dash point. So say that for me.
Impact, yeah, impactivity. That was
Impactivity. Okay, that
yeah,
makes sense.
impactivity slash the point.
Okay, wonderful. Well, Steve, thank you so much. This has been a delight having you on here today, and I know our audience enjoyed the presentation that you gave. And I just want to say thank you again for sharing your insights. We do really appreciate it.
Thanks, Brenda. My pleasure.